I feel like we need to help a player here in the NBA with some suggestions on how to get his career back on track. So, but I'm going to start with a few stats here, and let's see if you can pick these players. Yep. First stat, number one, player number one. All right. Career averages. Currently, career averages of 21 points a game, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, and doesn't shoot the three ball very well. He's only averaging about 28% from the 3-point line. But he's played 1,000 games now, and he's an all-star. Can you pick the player?
1,000 games and career averages of 20.
21, 4 and 4. It's no scrub. He's been an all-star multiple times now.
Well, he's played 1,000 games, so he's also not a scrub. This would have been a great total one. I have no idea. Who is this player?
Player A is DeMar DeRozan. Obviously had a long career and very respected player, and probably going to play for a fair few more seasons, I would imagine. Player B, this player here has career averages of 18 points, about 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Nearly averages 2 steals a game for his career. Also, not much of a three-point shooter. Only averages 2 threes a game for his career over 700 games, and shoots about 32% from the three-point line. Who's player B? Can you pick that? All Star two, All
Like
Star
an,
two. There you go, All
I feel
Star
like I
two.
needed a feel like I needed a graphic just
Uh,
to really assist me with this. There's a lot of numbers to keep in my head. First one was DeMar DeRozan at 1,000 games. 700 games would be maybe like a 10-year vet. Um, with a bad 3-point clip. I don't know. Are we talking about John Wall? I feel like you wanted to mention John Wall.
I'm talking about Jimmy Butler. Jimmy
Hey,
Butler. Yeah, he's not really renowned as a three-point shooter. So now, if I give you this third player that we really want to assist you, I think it's probably a no-brainer. You're going to pick it straight up. He currently has career averages of 14 points, 7 or nearly 8 rebounds, all right, 7.5 assists. Okay, and but he's shooting 14% from the three-point line. You can pick this player, correct?
I feel
No,
like
no.
no. I feel like no. Who's shooting 14% that isn't like doing it out of random need?
No, you give up. I'm talking about Ben Simmons. I'm talking about Ben Simmons.
Who?
Okay, Ben,
Did you? Who?
and it feels a little bit like that. But I guess we're Australian and we like to see Australians in the NBA. Ben Simmons, a few years ago, he was number one prospect for our whole country in the NBA. Yeah, probably easily surpassed now by Josh Giddey. Arguably, Joe Ingles is having just a much more longevity in his career and just contributing to successful teams and just being in the right spots on teams that make playoff runs and sort of plays his role. And here we have Ben Simmons now, obviously in no man's land. He's still got a few years, still paying himself a max contract here with the Brooklyn Nets. And obviously, right now, his season averages are down to under 7 points a game, still averaging 6 assists and 6 rebounds. Okay. But he's not shooting. He's not shooting. But I think as a simplest take here, and obviously, we're from 1,000 kilometers away, he can have a career that's going to get to 1,000 games. He's about 300 games right now. All right, he can have a career that gets to 1,000 games. All right, but he doesn't need to change that part of his game with the three. We talk about that all the time. Yeah, it was all that Ben Simmons hate when we actually knew who Ben Simmons was, right? But he can still play his style of game. All right, by grabbing boards, by making the right plays. Okay. And it probably starts with him being redefined as maybe a power forward or a center.
700 games to go to get to that 1,000 mark. We're talking about a player who's had probably one of the greatest drop-offs without a known reason, right? So, we've watched players tear their Achilles, tear their ACL, and then come back years later and they're just not the same. And they're trying really hard and it just doesn't click, right? Derrick Rose is the one that always pops to mind, right? We watched him at the peak of his powers, hurt his knee, comes back, and it just never clicked the same way. He had success, but it just never clicked the same way. We don't know what that moment was for Ben Simmons, right? So there is this whole tangent about his back being a certain way. There's this whole tangent about the mental side of it. but we don't actually know what that moment was that broke him, that prevented him from being able to maximize that potential, stay at that level. He is not the same player, right? And I guarantee you he will get to the 10-year mark in the NBA, because what will happen is after this contract, someone will say, we will offer you X, Y, and Z at a very low cost, and we'll take a flyer on you and see what can happen, right? Players like Darko Milicic, who clearly weren't ever going to make it, they got a couple of seasons. Anthony Bennett got a couple of teams, despite the fact that it wasn't working. Hashim Thabit got a couple of teams. People will take a chance on this, right? Because we do know what the potential is, the ceiling is. It's all NBA. It's defensive player of the year candidate, runner up. It's running the offense, averaging almost 10 assists. But until we know what it was that's gotten him to this point, I don't feel confident. I wouldn't feel, if I was a GM, I would not feel confident in taking the flyer on him for anything less than like the lowest 10th, 11th man contract equivalent.
I think the first step here is that he still has, I don't know, what, 2 or 3 years left on this max contract. Unless they're going to buy him out somewhere, and in that sort of sense, it probably would be in Brooklyn's best interest, considering that they're in a sort of that middle ground territory. They're not really contenders. They have no real superstars. They're not expected to win a ring this year or next at this point now, with the trades obviously they've just made. That they can find a role for Ben Simmons to return to a productive player role, you know, productive player mode. Okay, and I'm not saying he's going to go back to sort of the 16, 8 and 8 that he used to average, and he was trending like maybe he's going to be the next LeBron, if we remember that talk when he first came into the league, sort of thing. Okay, but he could still be a productive player that plays at the 4 or the 5, not at the 1, because the 1 has to be able to start the offense at the top of the key. If you don't guard him, he strokes the 3, he shoots the ball, he makes a rotation of that first card or that first ball motion, he goes into a corner or something along those lines. You're in the corner, you're open, you got that look when the ball swings because another player makes a drive. You shoot the 3. That's not Ben Simmons. That's the point. It's not Ben Simmons. And I alluded to obviously some of these other players that have long careers that have not relied or needed to shoot 5, 6, 7, 8 threes a game that a lot of guards now come in and sort of being asked to do. So if you put Ben Simmons, and it comes back to the coaching staff and the organization, maybe this is a whole nother podcast. Maybe the Brooklyn Nets is not that right organization. But if you put him into the right position here, he can go back to being Ben Simmons that helps your team fill that role. Okay, but he is now a 4 or a 5 and not a one man.
Personally, if I had to make a coaching call, I'd say he is supposed to be a 3 in the Iguodala, Okoro kind of swingman, Dennis Rodman sort of stuff. Like it is not a scoring option. He is the Swiss Army knife. That's what you want him to do. I guess out of the two of us, you clearly have a lot more stock. You clearly have a lot more hope in him. Um, we're dealing with a player that's almost unprecedented. As I said before, we do not have a known moment, right? The one that everyone clutches to is the pass, right? The pass where he has the open dunk after spinning off Trae Young and passes it. That's the moment that everyone feels like he was different from that moment. But that isn't the moment, or at least it isn't the one that makes sense to be the moment. But there is a moment where he is now a completely different player. And it is probably the first time in NBA history that that moment has occurred, and no one knows exactly what that moment is.
Well,
And because of that,
how did Markel Fultz lose his shot? We've had those sort of situations, right? And it does happen.
but the difference between Markel Fultz and Ben Simmons is Ben Simmons came in with blaring issues that everybody had already analyzed to death. He doesn't shoot, he's got a hesitancy to shoot, and you know, don't put him on the free throw line. And the longer he was in the lead, people started to exploit these weaknesses and started to realize from a game plan standpoint, do this, and this will probably happen. And it continued to happen. He never got better year after year from his shooting issue, right? And Marco Fultz, don't know what was wrong with his shoulder, but he has gotten better year after year. He set the bar low for himself, but he is slowly climbing back. Unfortunately, he seems to be a bit injury bitten. But the Ben Simmons thing, he coasted, right? He coasted on a lot of natural talent for a period of time. and that has now run out. People have figured out how to play him. And, you see, who was it? Was Duncan Robinson? I saw this clip of Duncan Robinson met Ben Simmons in the low post. And Duncan Robinson can barely get playing time for being a defensive liability. And yet somehow Ben Simmons makes a very lame attempt at getting into the key and then just dishes out. That that isn't even the same dude from beginning. You know what I mean? Like you see all these like highlights of, oh wow, where was this player that dropped 42 points on Utah just 2, 3 years ago? It Something has happened, right? Like from a like I almost like want to channel a medium just to talk to someone about what happened to Ben Simmons because something happened. And there is lots of different identifiable moments, but there's nothing significant that explains how we went from all NBA, clearly a max contract player with like this allure of potential that if he gets a jump shot, he's suddenly better, to I don't understand how we're supposed to fit him into a rotation. And he has no interest. He has no interest. He does not show an expressible interest in getting better. So you want him to play the 4 and the 5, but what is he going to do on those two roles that actually makes him viable? So maybe I guess the follow-up question here is who would you pair him with to bring out this version of Ben Simmons that you envision for him?
Well, you need a genuine stretch 4, stretch 5. So a big man that can open up the lane. So you can't put two guys that can't shoot a three at the 4 and the 5 in today's modern game. I think. Okay, so Ben Simmons would be that one player that is not able to really shoot a high clip at the 3 or at all at the 3 effectively, because there's still players out there that do not shoot the 3 that are 4 or 5 men that still carve out a career in the league, even if it's not such a focus point now in today's game.
I mean, names that come to mind, I'm like, you'd put him in Minnesota, right? Teaming up with Cat. But the problem is we're seeing what happens when you've got a clogged up paint situation. It doesn't work for Cat. So it
Yeah,
actually
but
won't work.
Simmons and Gobert are two different games too. All right, Gobert at seven
Are
three or
they?
so. Gobert at seven.
Are they though?
Have you seen Gobert move at 7'3"? That was the point. So think back
Have
about prime Ben Simmons. Okay, Ben Simmons was 6'10", or he's 6'10". He hasn't changed. I don't think he's gone shorter. Okay, 6'10", and he moved with the fluidity of a guard. Yeah, he could handle the ball and get around you. So you could any guard that was 6'5" or below could not match up against this guy that's 6 inches taller than you. That's the point. Gobert is always a traditional big man, 7'3", shot blocker, defensive player, absolutely, but he does not move like Ben Simmons.
I don't think Ben Simmons moves like Ben Simmons anymore. Okay, like I, yeah, the comp I'm trying to create in my head, I'm like thinking, do you want him to be like an Amari Stoudemire sort of type, right? Where he has a dedicated pick and roll sort of partner, and that's his goal, and he slashes and he sets hard screens, and he'll grab some boards and be athletic on that side. The issue is the NBA is not kind to those players anymore because stretching the floor spacing is huge, and clearly he is able to be psyched out now, right? So there is a public record of him being a certain level and he's completely dipped off. And the mental fortitude comes into question. So many things come into question. I don't know. I think the way that you talk about Ben Simmons is the Ben Simmons who just flamed out of the playoffs against Atlanta 2, 3 years ago. And we want to see what he comes back to. We saw him come back to Brooklyn in a situation that really should have favored him, in which he's the third option instantly, has to run the offense and, use off ball screens and all this jazz. And I don't think he's the reason why KD and Kyrie left. I'm very fascinated for that 30 to 30 that will come out eventually about what the hell happened in that Brooklyn situation. But Ben Simmons had a perfect opportunity. Now he's on a perfect opportunity where it's a team with no expectations, a bunch of 3 and D players, and yet he's not going to get court time because he can't facilitate on that role. And as you want him to play the 4 and 5, he can't do that because he gives up too much size. It is bad. It's bad. And you could see him playing on Houston and Charlotte and San Antonio and whoever else is going to sell it well for the next couple of years. And buyout would be an option. I reckon he'll get bought out. He might get a trade for a draft pick or two. I think we're going to see, like, we're watching the decline, and whatever aspiration you have for him to incline um, is enviable. It means you have a good soul, a good heart, but Just not seeing it.
I feel like you're just trying to use some key words today as word of the day or something like that. I'm not too sure, but I was thinking about you said who would be the perfect player to put again alongside Ben Simmons at the 4 and the 5. If you put Simmons at the 4, who would you play him at the 5? And look, I'm gonna say it's gonna be a player that's not even in the league right now, but Victor Wembanyama and that sort of prototype, or Chet Holmgren, that sort of prototype that's big, lanky, can handle the ball and stroke the three, and probably is willing to shoot six, seven threes, alongside a four-man that is still agile and can move. I'm not saying he's Ben Simmons from 4 years ago, okay, but I'm saying that he's still more athletic than many sort of four men that don't really move that that well as a guard in a sense. They're much more sort of traditional sort of big men. I think that's the position that he would succeed in. So look, maybe it's not going to happen in Brooklyn. Maybe Brooklyn at the moment is a bit of a sort of black hole for players to go to, and I don't know where they go to from here. But look, I don't know. From my end, use some nice positive praise words for me right there. Look, I'm optimistic, and I'm hoping that we see some Ben Simmons back in the future, because I think, again, just like we talked about other players with injuries, a good prime Ben Simmons is good for basketball and good for the league. And I guess as basketball fans, I guess we can only sort of hope and talk about maybe what that could look like.
But the difference is Zion is a very good player and we want to see him on the court and he can't stay healthy, right? And we have a couple of clues as to why that might be. The build, the mileage, just the predisposition, we're not too sure. We don't know what's wrong with Ben Simmons. We actually don't know what's wrong with him, right? And to bring it back, maybe we need to see the scans. Maybe he hasn't got a back issue. We need to see the scans.
Yo, this is Two Guys with Spare Time. I'm Faz, this is Nick. You're probably a basketball fan like us, so hopefully you can throw us an assist in giving our video a like and subscribing to our channel.
And if you got thoughts, feelings, or even some suggestions, please put them down in the comment section below. And thank you for using your spare time to watch us in our spare time.